Success in life. Now it's time to leave your legacy. Right here on The Leadership Voice. Welcome to The Leadership Voice. I'm your host, Jay Barbuto. Today's show features the paths to great achievements and leaving your legacy. Joining us today will be Pat Donahue, Chairman and CEO of Donahue Schriber Realty Group, and Mike Groff, retired CEO, Toyota Financial Services, Americas Region. We also have a special leadership lesson being delivered by Professor Shadi Goodarzi. But let's start things off with today's quote of the day. Today's quote comes from Shannon Alder. Carve your name on hearts, not tombstones. A legacy is etched into the minds of others and the stories they share about you. Our first guest today on The Leadership Voice is Pat Donahue. Patrick Donahue serves as Donahue Schriber's Chairman and Chief Executive Officer. Mr. Donahue joined the company in 1979 and has been involved in every aspect of the business, including leasing, asset management, development, and corporate strategy. Mr. Donahue has been instrumental in fostering key relationships and opportunities that paved the way through the company's early days in regional mall development and management, and parlaying the knowledge and disciplines obtained into becoming a recognized leader in the operation and development of neighborhood, community, and power shopping centers. A 1978 graduate of the Cal State Fullerton, Mr. Donahue is a past trustee and former Western Division Vice President for the Internal Council of Shopping Centers, and currently serves on its foundation board. Mr. Donahue's philanthropic works include Kids Work, Guardian Scholars, the California Showcase, the Orange County Real Estate Luncheon for OC veterans, Notre Dame High School, and the Rose Bowl Legacy Board. So it is with great pleasure to welcome here to the Leadership Voice, Mr. Pat Donahue.
Thanks, Jay.
Pat, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show today to share your wisdom with our audience.
Thanks, Jay. Great to be here.
Terrific. Maybe we could start by you sharing a little bit about how you evolved during your career into different roles and eventually became the CEO at your current spot.
Well, I joined Donahue Schriber pretty much out of school at Cal State Fullerton in the late 70s. And it was a very small company. There were 11 of us. It was my brother's company. Dan was 13 years older than I was. And his business partner, Tom Schriber. And they were young guys kind of enjoying the run-up of real estate in Orange County, and they were building an organization. And I didn't really have much going on at the time. I had met my future wife and didn't really want to go, and I was thinking of being an athletic director and would have to travel the country. And Tom Schriber says, what else are you going to do? Why don't you come to work for us? And I said, well, okay, I'll try it. And frankly, I didn't like it much. But we were in the mall business throughout Southern California. We developed Glendale Galleria and Fashion Island in Newport Beach for the Irvine Company. And I found a place where I could really help Dan and Tom be a little bit different. I was kind of their problem solver, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I worked with them for 24 years and was the number 3 man in the company. And then tragically, Dan passed away in the middle of the night in 2002. And the board decided that I was the natural leader and had done everything to become the CEO. So I got the job out of a very tragic event, and yet, Dan would be very proud of what we've been able to do, and we've honored his legacy of the company. And Tom Schriber is still Chairman Emeritus, and it's a wonderful group of people. And we now have 65 neighborhood shopping centers from San Diego to Seattle.
Oh, that's terrific. So as you think about the different things that you achieved at DSRG, maybe you could talk a little bit about what you see as the greatest achievement so far.
Well, I think there are two. I really think that the first one was really how we navigated the death of our chairman. That morning we had just transferred ownership to a new shareholder to the tune of $150 million, and they get a call in the middle of the night before the check had cleared. We had to inform them that they had lost their chairman. And so what we did in those early hours and the days following are one of my proudest moments. I think we took a crisis and we handled it very efficiently. The next one would have to be the financial crisis. And looking at what happened in the markets and in real estate particularly, in our company, and Larry Casey, our president, and all of our great people, we were able to navigate our way through it, and I'm very proud that we were able to do it and restructure our bank lines. We never defaulted on any notes, but we broke covenants, and so you had to raise money and bring in our shareholders and do that. And those are, if I look at and say, what did we really get an A paper on? I think we got an A paper on both of those crises, and they came out of crises.
And it sounds like those were incredible challenges to overcome. Would you offer any advice for folks that ever have to deal with either of those two types of situations?
Yeah, I think there are probably two things or three things that I would recommend. First off is keep your poise, right? Panic never did any good for anybody, even though you feel like it. And so keep your poise. Next, I would say be bold. When you're in a crisis particularly, I think I think people will follow a bold leader versus a timid leader. And so be bold. And then thirdly, I think is probably one of the successes of the company is be very focused. Don't let the noise get into your decision process, and really understand exactly what it is you're trying to do and try and keep out that noise.
No, that's great advice. That's great advice. Now, I know your company gets very involved in the community and gives back and tries to make a difference. Could you talk a little bit about what inspires you to give back?
You know, Jay, frankly, we really, the main catalyst was Dan's passing. We had no time to grieve Dan. We had a company that had just changed hands. I had family, I had elderly parents, I had Dan's young family, I had my own family grieving with frankly, the patriarch of the family and the visionary of our company. So there was no time to grieve. And really one thing that we could do was to kind of give back and try and continue Dan's legacy. So that was probably the catalyst. The real thing I think that gave me a business direction on it, I heard Jack Welch speak. Jack was the kind of the quintessential CEO in my growing up in business with General Electric. And he was a tough Irish Catholic guy from Boston, right? And I heard him talk, and Jack said, you know, only successful companies can give back to their communities. And it was like one of those moments. I don't know what else Jack Welch said the rest of the hour and a half I listened to him, but I've never lost that little soundbite. And I took it as a challenge that, number one, I wanted to be the CEO of a successful company. I wanted to make sure that we hit all of the definitions of a successful company. And so we make it a point that that's one of our defining metrics of how we're doing. So we have been involved in giving back to the community. And frankly, not only is it great for the community, it's good business. We've made great relationships with the people. People like to do business with like-minded people. And everything we do with the charities that we're involved in, it's all with the same people that we call and say, hey, what about this? What about that? We started, KidWorks was right after Dan's death in Santa Ana. And we've started the Orange County Community Foundation along with the Orange County Real Estate Group, now has the Veterans Luncheon. And that was our company executive team underwrites the lunch. Our company's a sponsor, but it's really our executive team, individually. We underwrite the entire lunch to go, and we've raised about $2.4 million to give back to veterans organizations here in Orange County. Our fourth luncheon will come up here later in April.
And I think that's terrific, and I think it really demonstrates how your organization is leaving a legacy.
I think it's part of your culture. You know, it's part of your company culture, and I get all the credit for it. All the work goes for the people at Donahue Schriber that do all the work, whether it's with Guardian Scholars here or House of Hope at Christmas time and all the different things we're doing. Our people are actively involved. I just get all the credit.
Yeah. Well, I think that people see the difference that's being made, and they attribute a lot of great things to your organization.
Well, I hope so, and we're thrilled to be able to give back and try and make a little bit of a difference here in Orange County.
You know, a lot of organizations are giving back more and more and more, and we're seeing maybe it's a shift, maybe it's just a change of times, but more and more organizations are starting to really give back and try to make a difference in the community. Why do you suppose it is that so many high achievers are really starting to think about giving back and leaving a legacy?
You know, I think there is a social consciousness that has come, or a social conscience that has come in. And I think most of these people that are doing it many of them are, whether they're tech, they're business people. And I think that they realize that the private sector has to play a role in this versus just leaving it to the government to solve all these problems. I think all of us, many of us feel that way, that, hey, the government, that's fine, but these are insurmountable problems that take not only money, but they take different kinds of thinking and getting rid of bureaucracies and new creative ideas. And so I think you're seeing that people are saying there's a lot of opportunity here. We're amazed at what has gone on in 3 years of funding in Orange County on just the veterans services in Orange County and what we've been able to do as the public sector with existing veterans organizations. We're shocked at the services and the improvement of the services. A lot of work to do, but we're amazed at what we've been able to do as a group of people said, hey, we got an idea. Let's come to lunch. We're going to raise $800,000 at a lunch, and we're going to put that money back in to these organizations, one of whom is at Cal State Fullerton and their veterans program right here who are doing a great job.
So I think we have time for one more question. So if you were asked by somebody for advice, somebody who wants to achieve great things, somebody who wants to become a great success, what advice would you give somebody if they were to carve out some of your time and say, you know, what is the key here?
You're going to think this is a canned answer, but I have a saying that I like to remind myself of, and that is one from Albert Einstein. And he said, do not strive to be a success, strive to be of value. And I think that's really important for anybody that, you know, success is very fickle. It is, you know, who is success? I mean, first off, define it as to what it is for everybody. But then you look at and you talk to people that may fit your definition, and all of them will say, well, I hit the market right, my timing was right, oh, was I lucky, all that. It's fickle. It's fickle. I don't think that's where you start. I think you start, though, I think there is some value in Einstein's words where he says, be of value, right? That's how you're going to be a success. When somebody comes and says, hey, that's the person I want to follow. Why do I want that? Well, that person's valuable to our organization. Don't let another organization have that person. Let's put them, they're our most valuable employee. Let's put them in our most difficult situation. That's people miss that. The people that get things done in the toughest times, those are your most valuable people. That's who you want. You don't want the people the easy ones are easy. You don't learn anything in the easy ones. It's the tough ones. But I think that would be the advice I'd have. Don't worry about all the trappings and making money. That all comes. And I know it sounds very strange and people don't believe that. I heard the same thing at 25 years old. Oh, really? How does that? But frankly, it's true. I've never gone and said, I want to make $1 million tomorrow. There are people that do that. But I really think you really keep your feet on the ground, your eyes and your ears open to opportunities. You're bold. When presented with an opportunity, be bold, and the tougher the problem, raise your hand the highest to go take that problem on, because that's where you're going to be of value to your company.
Oh, that's terrific. So when the greatest challenges brings out the greatest opportunities.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, I want to thank you for being on the show today. We're going to be back to do Q&A here in just a few minutes.
Great, Jay. Right? Okay. I'll look forward to it.
And now it's time for a featured segment of the Leadership Voice. It's today's Did You Know? If you were asked to guess whether companies or individuals are bigger givers to charities, you might think companies. But a recent study found that corporations only accounted for 5% of annual giving in the USA, with foundations tripling that at 15%. But the overwhelming majority of donations come directly from individuals at a rate of 72% of total giving in the US. This means that the overwhelming majority of donations to charity come from the generous hearts of individuals. It's now time for today's Leadership Countdown. Today's show is about achieving successes and leaving a legacy. So today's Leadership Countdown comes from Forbes.com. We bring you the 5 most generous people in America. Number 5 is Michael Bloomberg. Number 4, George Soros. Number 3 is Paul Allen. The number 2 most generous person in America is William Dietrich. And the number 1 most generous person in America is Margaret Cargill. Please stick around. We have Mike Groff in the studio, and we'll be right back after this commercial break.
Well, we found here at Honda Center in the Anaheim Ducks that the Center for Leadership brings expertise in doing research, in doing training. The faculty that has come and given the training to our employees does all the research themselves. They're not pulling this information off the shelf. They're out there researching themselves, talking from firsthand experience, and it brings such a level of competency that we, again, don't find from other trainers that are on the market.
Well, simply put, is what really differentiates and distinguishes Fullerton and the Center for Leadership, really is your expertise. You guys are able to create customized content for our business based on true research.
The faculty from Cal State Fullerton, obviously they're professors of their field. They have deep knowledge and research, but also, aside from the theory, they really bring in some practical examples, and they bring in a lot of interactive activities.
The Bringing Learning to Work initiative is our way of meeting the needs of Orange County businesses and communities. When our clients ask the Center for Leadership to come to bring learning to work, the clients know that they're getting cutting-edge information, the latest thinking in the field, but they're also getting world-class training. Welcome back to the Leadership Voice. Our next guest today is Mike Groff. Mike is a proud Titan, earning his bachelor's in business from Cal State Fullerton before moving on to earn his master's in business at Chapman. Groff has over 40 years of experience in automotive financing, covering credit administration, collections, customer service, finance and insurance product development, leasing, marketing, strategic planning, commercial finance, international operations, sales, and dealer relations. He is recognized by associates for his leadership skills, his ability to facilitate change, and the development of people. Mike is a national trustee for the Boys and Girls Club of America and served as president and chief executive officer of Toyota Financial Services USA, as well as CEO of its TFS Americas region. Please welcome to the Leadership Voice, Mike Groff.
Hi, Jay.
Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
I'm thrilled to be here.
It's great to have you. Maybe we could start by telling our audience, telling our folks a little bit more about you and how you evolved during your career to eventually become the CEO of Toyota Financial Services North America.
I'd love to do that. So just a quick minute or two about my personal background, because I'm a proud native Californian. Mm-hmm. A lot of transplants to California. I'm not one of them. I'm a native Californian. So I grew up in Los Angeles and one of 7 kids, and learned an awful lot about life from my parents and our value system and really things we should think about to be successful. That journey included going to high school, Notre Dame High School in San Fernando Valley. I went to LA Valley Community College. I did 1 semester at Cal State Northridge, and then my friends called and said, we're going to go to Fullerton. You want to go with us? And so the 3 of us were roommates here in Orange County and all went to Fullerton. We're all Fullerton grads. While I was at Fullerton, I was actually a senior. My brother helped me get a part-time job at General Motors. It was General Motors Acceptance, the finance company of General Motors at the time. And really, it was just intended to be a part-time job, help me pay for my classes at Fullerton and pay for my school books. But as it turns out, I guess I did a pretty good job. A few months in, they offered me a full-time job. And I got a company car and pretty good pay and benefits, and I decided to do it. So I extended my Fullerton life by 1 year so that I could squeeze in my last half a dozen classes or so. I stayed at GMAC for 7 years, and worked in 3 different offices there, kind of learned the fundamentals of the automobile finance business. And along the way, I got a call from a headhunter. And the headhunter said there's a little company called Toyota, and they're looking to start a finance company, and they want to know if you'd be interested. And so I had an opportunity in 1983 to start with what was a genuine startup at the time at Toyota Financial Services. I was the 7th person hired there. Today there's over 3,300. So I had an opportunity to grow a little tiny startup company into a pretty good sized company. And when I left this past November, it was the largest auto finance company in America with over $120 billion in automotive assets. So that's the shortest version there of a wonderful career over 40 years in the automobile finance business.
You know, see, what's great about that story, though, is that you were at Toyota Financial Services from the very beginning, back when automobile companies were just starting to really create their own financial network.
That's right. That's right.
And so you've got an interesting perspective, because when people think of Toyota, they think of it today as being such a large and established company. And when they think of Toyota Financial Services, they immediately imagine it also to be a highly established and highly large organization. So the thought that you were there when you were the 7th, you were employee number 7, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was a wonderful ride, that's for sure. Great lessons along the way.
Along the way, I'm sure you've had lots of lessons and lots of obstacles that you've had to overcome. Could you share maybe 1 or 2 of the obstacles that you've had to overcome, and maybe how you went about getting through those times?
Yeah, I think the discussion about obstacles is really important, because especially I think when people are listening to people that maybe they view as being very successful in whether they're business people or artists or actors, and think, wow, what a wonderful life they have. But everybody faces obstacles, and some of them can be personal. They may be health issues in a family or loss of family members, and I certainly went through that. I've lost both my parents along the way. That was very hard. I was very close to my parents. We have a very close family. And there's obstacles in the career itself. There's setbacks like not getting a job you were convinced you were going to get, and somebody else gets it. And you have to deal with sort of the emotional reaction to, am I not good enough? Did I not work hard enough? Is there politics involved? And those kinds of things. And, so I think the lessons were always to look at those obstacles, kind of regroup from them and learn from them, and say, well, what was the takeaway here? And I love the saying that's crafted different ways at different times, but it's not about how many times you get knocked down, it's about how many times you get back up. And so whatever those obstacles were, I think it was really a question of me sort of digging deeper and having the resilience to say, okay, it wasn't a great day, it wasn't a great week or a great month, but we're going to figure it out, and then we're going to be better because of it and moving forward.
Yeah, I love that the imagery of imagining the falling down but then getting up. When people get up after they've fallen down, they brush themselves off.
Right.
And it's that moments when they're brushing themselves off that they start thinking about why they fell. And they start thinking about maybe what they could do differently next time, and how could they prevent the fall. And I think that's a great lesson for all of our viewers, is that it's not whether we fall, because we're going to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And really, what are you going to do about it? And I think, human nature, there's a tendency to say, well, this happened or that happened, or I kind of got a bad deal here and I wasn't treated fairly. But you also have to be accountable for yourself and say, well, what could I have done? And was I the best qualified? Was I really ready for that? And then how are you going to prepare yourself for the next time? How will you be better the next time?
So, Mike, as you look at your career, what have you learned during your career? I'm sure you've had lots of lessons, but what have you learned during your career that you wish you had known, say, 30 years ago, that could have really helped?
Yeah, I mean, there's, I'm sure, a lot of things that would have been helpful 30 years ago, but I do think the ones that I always think about when I get asked a question like that is, when you're young, and especially when you're coming out of college and you've got your brand new degree and you feel confident, I'm ready to take on the world, And then you get there and realize, wow, this is a lot harder than I thought. And there's a lot of other really good people here that are really smart and work really hard. I think what I would have liked to have learned was sort of a few key things that always come to mind. One is about self-awareness. And when I talk about self-awareness, I'm talking about this idea of really understanding who you are. What do you stand for? What is your value system? What is going to be your brand at the end of the day? When somebody says, I had a meeting with Mike Groff, what are they going to say? Are they going to say, oh boy, I know how he is. He's a nightmare. Or are they going to say, I'm fair and I'm smart and I'm well prepared for the discussion, I treat people fairly, etc. So I think self-awareness is really important. The second thing I learned was really this idea of authenticity, that you really should never try to be somebody else. You can learn from others, both good things and not so good things, but never try to be somebody else. You got to be who you are, and so being authentic and true to yourself and that brand that you develop, I think, is important. And then the last thing I would say that I've thought a lot about as people have asked me about my success is the importance of risk-taking. You know, I think sometimes people feel in their careers, really whatever that career path is, either the opportunities will just show up or somebody will tell them, hey, here's your next opportunity. It doesn't work that way. You've got to be willing to take risks. You've got to move into a different area where you don't have the expertise, but you need it. A lot of people hesitate. They don't want to do it because what if I fail? I was comfortable in this job, but if I do that one, what if I'm not good at it? I'll be wishing I had the old job back. Well, you got to take that risk, and I think that's important. I think as I've observed people who are struggling with their careers, a lot of times they'll say, but are you the one that's holding it back? Are you not willing to take a chance? Do you have enough confidence in yourself to take that risk?
Yeah, I think that's great advice for folks. Really, all three of your points. The importance of knowing who we are individually, the importance of being true to ourselves and being authentic, and also being ready and willing to take chances, willing to take a risk in life. I think those are three great points.
Yeah, you know, Jay, I learned something along the way that I should have been smart enough to know sooner, but you asked about what would I have liked to know 30 years ago. Well, one of them is that when you aren't as conversant in a certain topic, if you aren't as deep in that subject, but you go into that area, that actually is when the learning takes place, right? It's not when you're comfortable. If I have a certain job and I'm really good at it, and I'm going to come in tomorrow and do more of it, I'm really not learning anything. I'm just really good at that thing. And I'll tell you a quick story because I was the corporate marketing manager for Toyota Financial Services some years ago. Had done it for about 2 years. I believe I was doing a pretty good job. Got called in by the president at that time, and he says, I've got a new opportunity for you. I said, well, I'm not really looking for an opportunity. I've got a great job, and I love it. And he said, well, let me ask you something. If I keep you in that job, in 1 year from now, how much better will you be than you are today? And I sort of paused, realizing, okay, wait a minute, there's a message here. The message was clear. He was saying, yeah, you'll do another year of a great job, but you're not going to learn that much more. You've mastered what we needed you to learn. I want you to go over here where you know virtually nothing. I did that job. It wasn't necessarily my favorite job, but because I was no longer the smartest person in the room, I had to learn. I asked more questions. I did more research. I had to count on people to help me because I didn't know as much as they did. I think that's when learning takes place. And this idea of you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because when you're uncomfortable, I think that's when the learning takes place.
Yeah, we've heard that many times, that it's the dissonance of the discomfort is where oftentimes our greatest development will eventually come and shine through.
Absolutely.
Could you talk a little bit about the ways that you give back, and especially why you give back?
Yeah, I wouldn't say this, as, you know, if it was a similar question earlier, about 30 years ago, I'm not sure I understood the importance of giving back. You know, all my energy was about developing myself, developing my career, learning my craft. In time, you realize that the world really expects more out of you. And part of that is you've got to be willing to give back. I've had very good fortune in my life, and along the way I realized, you know what? I've got gifts to share, and I need to share those. And so I do it in a variety of ways. In my introduction, you mentioned I'm a national trustee for Boys and Girls Club of America. I have been with Boys and Girls Club for about 11 years, 12 years. I love that because I get to see those young people, and they're just starting out, and in many cases they maybe are coming from a family background where the role models don't have the experience. Maybe they've never been to college. So I love that idea that maybe I can sort of push somebody down a certain path. And I just think giving back's important. In fact, that's why I'm here today. I think I have an appreciation for what Cal State Fullerton did for me and my degree and the importance of that degree. And this is certainly part of my wanting to give back.
I think anything that we can ever do to capture the wisdom of folks and make sure that that wisdom has a forum to help others and to help others grow, help others to learn and to develop, I think that's always going to be a positive thing.
I think, look, I think legacy matters. And it's not just community service, which again I just said I think is really important, but the question of what was my legacy going to be as the CEO. So on the one hand, there's the business expectation, right, to do a certain amount of business and make a certain amount of money and support the Toyota enterprise. But I thought, well, if that's all I do, which we did do, by the way, ran a very successful business, was that enough? I didn't think it was enough. And so I carried on really the tradition that my predecessor had started, our commitment to deepening our community relations, but also our initiatives around diversity. So Toyota, I'm very proud that Toyota has been in the top 50 of Diversity Inc. survey for the last 11 years. This last year, the highest rating so far, we were number 25 in the country. And it's a very rigorous review, much like an accreditation of a college, where they come in and they really see what you're doing to support diversity. And those things don't happen by accident. They happen because there's a commitment at the company level and there's a commitment at the executive level to say we're going to make this important, we're going to do these things, and then you set out a course to do them. And I'm very proud of the work that was done during my time, and certainly the table that was set now for the gentleman that replaced me, and what I hope he will do with those things going forward.
This is wonderful to hear, and you really have described what is going to truly be a great legacy, both a legacy for yourself, but also a legacy for Toyota Financial Services, the startup that now nobody even thinks of it as anything resembling a startup.
Right.
But in your heart, you can still remember so clearly.
Right. Very few got to say they were there at the beginning and then saw it to today. So that's going to be a wonderful memory for sure.
So what advice would you give somebody, an aspiring person, that really wants to achieve great things, wants to achieve great successes? What would be your advice to that person?
Well, to start with, I think learning is really important. And I don't mean just formal education, although that's certainly included in it. But I think this idea that every day you need to be learning something. And I think as humans, there's a tendency to learn a job, learn a function, and then just keep doing it and possibly being very good at it, but really not learning more. I think for people that are dreaming bigger, that want to do more, they have to be willing to learn more. And so I don't think you say, well, I got my diploma and it now hangs in a nice frame on the wall, I'm done with education. I don't think that at all. I think it's a lifelong pursuit. I'm still learning every day. And taking those learnings and then doing something with them. So that's really the first thing. And then the other thing is, I think the importance of building relationships, and sometimes we talk about as relationships or networks or mentors, or sometimes I hear people saying you should have your personal board of directors. However you want to frame it, you don't go through life alone. You need people to support you. And one thing that really strikes me is the importance of feedback. And I've read a lot of articles about this, but humans aren't the greatest at feedback. We're not the greatest at giving it or receiving it. Why? Because we're defensive. I don't want to be told I'm not perfect, right? But that willingness to take feedback, and on the flip side, have people who you trust and who trust you, who are willing to say, you know, Mike, that was not your finest presentation today. Let me tell you what I think you should have done. And then on the receiving end, to be able, instead of defending myself, saying, okay, let me hear what you have to say. What could I have done? I think that's how you grow. You do some soul searching, you come back and say, okay, I'm not going to defend it, I'm not going to ignore it, I'm going to take it willingly, and I'm going to grow because of it. I mean, I think for younger people, they have to really accept they don't know everything. And there's lots to learn, and find people that will help you with that, mentor you, give you guidance, give you feedback.
I think that's great advice. And the journey of being a lifelong learner and staying open, keep learning, being open to new experiences and to learn from lessons in life and to be open for feedback. I think those are great advice for a young person or early career person that wants to succeed in this world. So I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thrilled to be here.
We're going to be back in a few minutes, and we're going to answer questions from the audience as part of our Q&A. It's now time for a featured segment of the show, our Leadership Example, where we recognize great examples of organizations leaving great legacies. Today we bring you the 20 largest endowments and foundations in the United States. Hear that? You know what that means. It's time for today's leadership lesson. Today's lesson is being delivered by Professor Shadi Goodarzi. So let's take 3 minutes to learn about the importance of success and leaving a sustainable legacy.
Hello, I'm Shadi Goodarzi, and here is today's leadership lesson. Today we are learning about the leadership legacy of sustainability. First of all, what is sustainability? A company's operation is sustainable if it meets its numerous and varied needs, but it doesn't compromise the ability of future generations to meet their needs. In this regard, sustainability is the key to the long-term success of companies and society as a whole. But how can a leader make the company practices sustainable? And more importantly, how can the company keep these practices as their core values, a legacy of leadership? To answer this crucial question, a leader should establish the culture and foundation of sustainable thinking across different levels in the corporation. The leader can follow triple bottom line, but simultaneously consider the social, environmental, and financial aspect of the decision-making process. To this end, 3 factors are crucial: education, foundation, and vision. Education. Through education, the critical question of what is sustainability and why is it important is answered. Goal of this education is that sustainability practices become the goodwill and the purpose within the organization. It is important that the employees realize that sustainability is a key to more promising future for both the company, which is nothing but themselves, and the community. Leaders should proactively pursue this goal and commit to educating others about the importance of sustainability. In this case, everyone finds it in their own benefit to contribute to a more sustainable corporation. Foundation. A leader should lay the foundation that facilitates sustainable practices. To this end, proper investment needs to take place. This can be initiatives by the human resources that support, promote, or incentivize philanthropic and social responsibility within the corporate and beyond. Or it can be corporate policies that take advantage of the circular economy, green products and services such as paperless processes, renewable energy sources for electricity, reducing the CO2 footprint of operational activities, and extract the maximum value from resources while in use, then recover and regenerate products and materials at the end of the service life. As mentioned earlier, Consideration should be given to all financial, social, and environmental factors. Vision. Leaders shouldn't only focus on the short-term objectives, but instead consider the long-term consequences of their decisions. Only under this condition it is possible to create a lasting legacy of sustainability. And this, in turn, requires a leader to think early on about how they can create a legacy that outlives their roles. Conforming to the three aspects discussed here, education, foundation, and vision, a leader can leave a positive and long-lasting impact on everyone's lives. This would be the leadership legacy, a sustainable corporation. I'm Shadi Gudarzi, and this has been your leadership lesson.
Thank you, Professor Gudarzi, for that insightful leadership lesson. It's now time for the Leadership Voices Q&A. Viewers, do you need some advice? Well, you've come to the right place. Every show we take questions from you, our viewers, and we answer them right here on the show. Today we have 4 questions for our guests. So let's get to our Q&A. Our first question is for Pat Donahue, and it comes from Kimberly in San Clemente, California. She asks, when doing a deal, is it more about the numbers or more about the people? Please explain how the two may balance.
Kimberly, that's a great question, and it's not an easy answer. It's not an easy balance. I would say that they both have their role, but I personally feel that if the people part is not in place, it doesn't matter what the numbers are. I really think it's, you should do business with the right people and people you're comfortable with and that you can trust to do what they say they're going to do. And so I would clearly start with the people side of it. Now, if the numbers don't work, the numbers don't work, no matter who the people are. And so they're critical to the process. But I really believe, and I'm a firm believer, that we waste a lot of time doing business with some people you shouldn't do business with. I think they're a much bigger time waster than the actual numbers. The numbers you should be able to quantify very quickly. But understanding people and whether you should do business with them or not is a little more difficult, a little more subjective, a little more art to it than science. But I'm a firm believer in the relationship piece. Business is just a lot more fun when you're dealing with people you like doing business with.
Pat, I can't agree more. I mean, I just think you can have the greatest project in the world, but if you don't have the right people with the right skill sets and the framework that they're going to operate or squared away, then I don't know how any great project or poor project has any chance of succeeding. I mean, I think it always starts with the people and making sure you have the right ones and have them with a clear vision of what you're trying to do. So
it starts with the people, but we can never overlook the numbers.
No, you can't overlook the numbers. If the numbers aren't right, it's not going to work. Doesn't matter what a great salesman, whatever your relationship is with them, they have to work for everybody. It has to be a win-win. It has to make sense for all the parties. But I think you do find yourself in business where you get a chance to say, okay, I can go with customer A or customer B, and you weigh that. Where do you have more fun? Who do you trust more? Who's going to do what they say they're going to do? And I think the relationships are critical to that. I think that's the big tiebreaker.
Terrific. So our second question is for Mike Groff, and it comes from Jonathan in Santa Ana, California. Jonathan asks, to whom in your life do you feel was most instrumental to your success that you have had? How has that inspired you moving forward?
Well, I can only assume that Jonathan means except for my friend Pat, who is an obvious first answer. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jonathan, for that question.
But I think, Jay, first of all, I know this sounds pretty cliche, but for me, it was my parents. And I say that because they taught me really my fundamental belief system, and that has driven everything I've done throughout my life, personally and professionally. Along the way, certainly a lot of great mentors that were willing to support me, give me advice, give me honest feedback when I wasn't at my best. Too many probably to name. People out in the broader world, executives of companies, politicians, others that I saw that I wanted to emulate for their character, how they presented themselves, how they did business. But really, I would still say it goes back to the fundamentals my parents taught me, which was really about the importance of being a good person and having integrity, the importance of hard work, and certainly this idea that education is fundamental in every respect, that you have to constantly be learning, and that education is something that gives you a much better chance to succeed in life.
Yeah, I'd have to, if I could just chime in, I'd have to agree. My mom and dad really set the tenor of those principles and those fundamentals, that foundation that you're with. My dad was a family doctor, and so and 5 boys, and nobody's a doctor, right? And Dad was not a businessman, and most of the boys ended up being businessmen. So I think all of us had a little bit of a mentor along the way. I was very, very fortunate that my future wife, my father-in-law, was an outstanding business person, Tom Kemp, and Tom was the president and CEO of Coca-Cola Bottling of Los Angeles. And Tom was a wealth of resource for me in my early career. We would sit on the beach and I would actually tell him what was going on, and he loved helping me navigate that space and challenging me. And from a business standpoint, I would have to say Tom Kemp was an invaluable resource to me, along with my parents, but then in business, obviously Dan and Tom. But Tom Kemp was a real blessing to my business career. Dan and Tom didn't even know it. I was so much smarter on Mondays after the weekend of sitting on the beach with Tom Kemp when I would go into meetings, because he would prep me and tell me how to do it. And this guy was a top executive like a Mike Groff, and I'm 25 years old, having a mentor like that. It was invaluable.
That's wonderful. And does that inspire you to give back as well and to mentor others?
Absolutely, and I'm sure Pat's going to say the same thing, but particularly as you gain wisdom with age, you not only appreciate the life you've had and how people helped you, so you have a desire to help others, but it also is a lot of fun. I mean, there's great enjoyment that I take in sponsoring and mentoring younger people who are on their journey and wondering if someday they're not going to be the CEO, and did in some small way were my fingerprints there, to help them on that journey. Absolutely.
Terrific. Well, our third question is for Pat Donahue, and it comes from Finn in Temecula, California. Finn asks, how do you bring people together for large-scale projects?
I think you do a lot better when you put your best people on your best projects. I think there's more value in your best projects. But bringing them together is really, we have a formula that it's about communication. We spend a lot of time, and it's a set communication. It's every 2 weeks we put everybody involved in a conference room with an agenda, and we go through so that everybody walks out of that room knowing what the plan is, exactly what is it are we trying to do. And I think because people create a lot of the issues. The business isn't that complicated. It's people that come in and they don't track. They have their own agendas. They got all these different things going on. And the CEO's role is really to keep all that going and make sure everyone is tracking. One of the things that I do, I am a fairly good listener. So in meetings particularly, I can see where things are going and if people are tracking with where the direction is. So it's really about bringing the right team together, like anything else, but then communicating with that team, making decisions, making sure they're decisive, and we go and make sure that everyone knows when you walk out, and in 2 weeks you better be ready. And I don't want to hear the dog ate your homework, right? If you had homework, you got to come in and you got to deliver. And it creates a very positive peer pressure environment. Nobody wants to disappoint their teammates. And so it's kind of creating that team atmosphere. And so far for Donahue Schriber, it's been a successful model.
And I would just echo that. I think that this idea of sort of project management is a lot of times underestimated. Somebody says, oh, we want to do such and such. Okay, well, I think we'll get Jane and we'll get Bill and we'll figure it out. But really, for projects to be successful, whether you're building a great building, shopping center, or Toyota's building a great car, right? It starts out with a dream. We say, what's the mission here? What are we trying to accomplish? Everybody gets on that same page and says, okay, right, we see what the mission is. And then you set a course and you have a plan and it has milestones and people are held accountable. And yet you see in business, that's not always as strong of a skill as you might think it would be. Sometimes the milestones just keep moving. Well, we didn't hit Friday. We're going to do it next Friday. Next Friday becomes the following Friday. I mean, you have to have accountability built into that system. It's about getting things done. So I think it's a really important question, and one that I think companies struggle with more than I think people realize.
And Mike, you touched on it. It's really a continual defining of exactly what is it are we trying to do. Because you get two people in the room, they may not be on exactly the same page. You now put 20 people in the room, the chances of everybody being on the same page are minimal, right? So it's really a constant redefinition of hey, what are we doing? Who's doing what to whom? And when's it going to done? Like you said, making things accountable. But I really think, I always go back to Mac McAllister at Downey Savings, who was one of the guys we used to do business with, and he was a great old businessman. And one day in a meeting, somebody made a long presentation, and he said, "Gentlemen, exactly what is it you're trying to do here?" And they said, "We want you to buy this credit business." He said, "Then why didn't you say so, right? Just tell us what we're going to do and go." People complicate everything. You know, they complicate everything. Just go, it's simple. Just go do it. And let's go decide. And I'm not saying they complicate it on purpose. They just complicate it by human nature. And you put enough people in the room, and it's hard to communicate. I think it's a critical piece, especially large projects, because they can wander off, and people think they know where you're going, and they may not, and they can do a lot of damage when that happens.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot here that can really guide younger minds or earlier career minds as they start thinking about these types of projects. I love the point about accountability and don't give yourself permission to make excuses. I think that's a message I think that's really important for early career folks to keep in mind.
To be a successful business, you got to work through that. You know, you've got to have good plans, you got to have great people backing them up, and then underneath that you have accountability to make sure it gets done.
And you create that team approach. You know, you create that team that, hey, I'm not going to let them down. I was supposed to do this. I better get this done. And whether you call it your homework or whatever for that meeting, there's a positive peer pressure. Peer pressure, you know, when somebody says peer pressure, it's always a negative connotation, right?
Doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be. I mean, I think positive peer pressure is one of the most powerful emotions that there are in the world. I mean, we all want to be accepted. We all want to be part of a team, and I'm all about, we do that all the time, and you don't want to let your teammate down, you know, you don't want to let the team down, and so I think it's really important, but it's communication, and it's understanding, it's vision, making sure that everyone stays on the same page, and keeping everybody accountable.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great lesson. Our fourth question is for Mike Groff, and it comes from Sarah in Covina, California. She asks, what does it take in your mind to become a great leader and success in your industry?
Well, Jay, I think Sarah is asking a really terrific question, and the evidence that it's a terrific question is there are literally thousands of books on leadership. There are courses at Cal State Fullerton and every other university. Mm-hmm. There's the Center of Leadership that we're with today.
Yes.
Leadership
yes,
is a very complicated topic, and yet when you really distill it down, I think of leadership as influencing, and influencing means the ability to move things forward. And can you get people to follow your lead or our lead if it's a group effort? And I think people think, well, that is the CEO's job or it's an executive's job. But I think back in my career and realized, you know, my leadership traits were showing all along the way. If you're in a meeting and people are wrestling with...
Our fourth question is for Mike Groff, and it comes from Sarah in Covina, California. She asks, what does it take in your mind to become a great leader and success in your industry?
Well, Jay, I think Sarah is asking a really terrific question, and the evidence that it's a terrific question is there are literally thousands of books on leadership. There are courses at Cal State Fullerton and every other university. Mm-hmm. There's the Center of Leadership that we're with today.
Yes.
Leadership is a very complicated topic, and yet when you really distill it down, I think of leadership as influencing, and influencing means the ability to move things forward. And can you get people to follow your lead or our lead if it's a group effort? And I think people think, well, that is the CEO's job or it's an executive's job. But I think back in my career and realized, you know, my leadership traits were showing all along the way. If you're in a meeting and people are wrestling with an answer, are you going to sit back and sort of watch the show while they wrestle with it and go nowhere? Or are you going to step in and say, hey, folks, look, we're not getting anywhere. How about if we do this? Maybe it's a compromise. Maybe there's a different way to approach it. That's leadership, and it's influencing. And I think people underestimate, no matter what level they are in an organization, they can be doing it. It doesn't come from the mountaintop. It actually comes from working together and having people follow your lead. And I think that's why it's a critical success factor for people that are successful, because they don't sit back and watch the show. Pat and I can't live sitting back and watching the show. We don't have the patience to sit back and watch the show, because if it's not moving forward, we're uncomfortable. We don't want to be part of something that's not moving forward. So I just think leadership is about that. But to do that, you're talking about things like confidence in yourself and your abilities. You're talking about the courage to speak up, maybe being the contrarian view in the room. And will you be alone? And can you live with that? It's those kind of characteristics that I think that you see in great leaders, no matter what type of leader they are.
I'd want to comment on the second part of the question, and that's success. And I think that I'm gonna share with Sarah a phrase by Albert Einstein, who said, "Don't strive to be a success, be of value." And I think those are very important words. Success is very fickle. It's based on timing, luck, a lot of different things. There's a lot of people that should have been successful that weren't, because of some calamity that happened they had no control over, right? And so success can be very, very fickle. But for you to be of value to your company or your family or to the people that you work with, I think that is one of the things that I focus on with regards to when I look at an employee and when I think about our family and anything about who the leaders are, is who are the most valuable of those people, right? Who's created the most value? Mike uses the phrase of a personal brand. Who has that most valuable brand? Who do you want to follow in that? I think it has a lot to do with the leadership piece. But I would encourage you, don't worry about success. Mike and I never could have drawn up that we would be sitting here in the roles that we have or had in 45, 55 years of our lifetime, and all of a sudden at 60 we found ourselves, or 55, we found ourselves in circumstances that frankly needed us. And it was, I don't know if that was divine intervention. In my case, if it was dumb luck, I don't know what it was. But it happened, and everything I had done up to that point had prepared me for that moment. And it wasn't about being a success. I didn't obsess about, am I successful or not? I did obsess about being of value and of being a contributor, and also hopefully being a leader in some format.
Yeah, I think it was luck is when preparation
meets opportunity. Yeah, preparation meets opportunity. That's yeah.
And a lot of times in our lives, opportunities might be there, but we're not ready for them.
Correct.
That absolutely happens. And I think particularly for young people maybe that are watching this, that's definitely an issue, right? Because maybe things aren't moving fast enough, right? They say, I'm ready, but where's that promotion? Where's that big assignment? So they have to understand sometimes patience is really what you need. You got to be patient. Maybe it's just not your day today. And that doesn't make it less frustrating for you, but I mean, you have to realize it doesn't always come when you want. But will you be ready? Will you strike when the opportunity does present itself? Because more often than not, when I hear somebody's come up for promotion and somebody says, well, they're not ready. And I say, well, what does that mean? And will they be ready next month, next year?
Right.
And how will they get ready?
Yeah, are we helping them get ready?
Are we helping them get ready? It's not going to just magically happen.
They have to pack.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I mean, I just think that's the way it has to get looked at. I don't think there's magic to it. I mean, I think there's a lot of effort that goes into people getting themselves ready, and certainly organizations helping people get ready. And then you have to have both. You have to have willingness. You have to have the desire for people to want to be better and put in the extra time and energy that it takes.
Yeah, I think for everybody out there, Jay, I interview a lot of young kids and help, I don't mentor them necessarily, but I do spend a lot of time with them trying to help them get started. And I always find it so interesting with a number of them, and they tell me, well, I said, where have you been? I've been there for a couple of years, and I got this. And I can just see it in their face. They feel they're falling behind. And I'll go to them, I said, well, you're falling behind. You're falling behind. You're 26. You've worked for 3 years, and you're not the president of that company. Well, I don't want to be the president, but yeah, you know what? You've hit it. I'm falling behind. And I always stop them and say, would you listen to yourself? You're 26 years old. You're going to live longer, which means you're going to work longer. The only reason you're falling behind is, to Mike's point, you're not growing every day. You got to decide how you're going to grow. Just because they haven't handed you the job doesn't mean that you don't stop growing in that, getting ready for that job, or that there isn't another job around the corner. So I do see that a lot in this generation. I hate to sound like an old curmudgeon, but you hear a lot about, I'm falling behind, and I'm going, wait, falling behind? Slow down here. This is a marathon. This is not a sprint. And yet that sprint, the one thing they said, the one question you asked Mike earlier about, what do you wish you would have known 30 years ago? I wish I would have known it was going to go this fast. Right? I just wish I would have known it was going to go this fast.
That's for sure.
Because I would have done some things a little differently.
No, that's great. I want to thank you both for being on the show and helping us with the Q&A. I think we really tackled these questions and gave our viewers some great pearls of wisdom. So thank you for
thrilled to be here,
being
Jay.
a part of this.
Thanks.
This has been the Leadership Voices Q&A. Thank you, Pat and Mike, for helping us with today's Q&A. If you have a question or need advice, send us your questions here to the Leadership Voice by email, leadershipvoice@fullerton.edu, or by Twitter @CSUF_leadership. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today's show. Today we learned about the paths to great achievements and business success, and also the beauty of leaving a legacy while doing it. Thank you to our guests, Pat Donahue and Mike Groff, for joining us, and a special thank you to Professor Shadi Goodarzi for delivering today's leadership lesson. Join us each episode of the Leadership Voice, because every show is different. I'm Jay Barbuto, and on behalf of the Center for Leadership on the beautiful campus of Cal State Fullerton, we'll see you next time right here on the Leadership Voice.